everybody, and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. Just a little precursor before the actual episode starts is we wanted to do an episode that kind of at least talk through at a high level my career and kind of how it connected together and how it eventually led us to the creation of Cyberdogz. I get asked a lot by other entrepreneurs, people in the industry, and even people like Kira who work with me that, how did you do this, or how did you get started? Where was your mind at? So we decided to create a bonus episode where we just kind of talk through some of these things. And yes, to some degree, we dust over the many details that kind of went into some of this stuff, but we definitely kind of touched on the different milestones and the aspects that kind of connected together that helped me make some decisions on how to advance my career, to how to become a better entrepreneur, and how to learn from others throughout that process. So we hope you like it. There's two parts to this. So if you're listening to part one or part two, either way, just know there's two parts, and I hope you enjoy it. And obviously, as always, if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to hear more from us about any of these topics, please reach out to us to let us know. Hello and welcome to another episode of Brand Retro. I have Kira back on the show.
So fast forward, and I know that you moved back home, right?
Yep.
You take this job with this big company. If you want to leave names, protect the innocent, we can as well. But so you take this bigger job. You work there for a while, more of a corporate America type setting. You're there. What prompts you to go, you know what? I'm done. I can't do it anymore. I want to fulfill that entrepreneurial spirit. And I want to, fly, right? For lack of a better cliche. What made you, one, know that it was time to go? And what gave you the confidence to say, okay, I'm ready to walk away from the comfort and the consistency of corporate life and move to fly by the seat of your pants, nothing is guaranteed, entrepreneur life?
Yep. I'll add one more thing in there. When I moved back, or not back, but moved from Texas, to Minnesota, again, I spent 9 years in the printing industry. And, I didn't really even understand that the printing industry was a thing, because when you get out of school, you're so focused, or at least we were so focused on going to work for an agency, where you could do more creative stuff. And we kind of thought that was, or at least that's what we were led to believe, is like, that's where the work is at the agency level. And as a graphic artist, I mean, you can go to private companies, you can go to corporate companies, you can go work in printing. I mean, there's lots of places you can go do what you do. And it does not have to be an agency setting. So when I first moved back, from Texas to Minnesota, I think I was back all of 2 days, and I started knocking on doors and just kind of looking for opportunities. And I ended up getting a job at a fairly large print company. They had a huge pre-press and graphic department. I believe there was, probably 15 to 20 people there. They had 2 shifts. So I started out on the night shift, which was 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And we were designing everything from postcards to posters to booklets to logos we were just doing a ton of stuff. And because of my background and my experience, even from coming from the Texas experience, I was able to jump right in that very fast-paced production type environment and do pretty well and crank out a ton of stuff. So I was in printing for total 9 years, but I would say somewhere in that, year 6, year 7, websites were becoming a thing. And I started to, okay, well, I can design everything print related. Now I'm going to learn how to design websites. So I started messing around with how to design websites, doing a lot of different things with that, and started to kind of run into a learning block of, where programmers kick in, right? And at the time, things weren't as drag and drop. They weren't as user friendly as they are today. So there was kind of 2 schools of thought. You were either front end or back end. And I was front end 100%, but I was running into struggles and communication breakdowns with talking to the guys who developed the back end. So I was like, man, well, what do I do there? Because I don't want to necessarily be a back end guy, but if I'm going to communicate with these people and want them, to execute something in a certain way, I got to speak the language. So at that point, I believe I was 28 at the time, but I ended up going back to school to get a IT degree. So I went back to school, took all the programming classes, did everything I could to basically secure that back end qualification so that I could communicate with these guys with no intention of being a programmer. I just wanted to better understand the full journey and better understand, how to communicate so that when I took my entire, repertoire, so to speak, of skills from design to, a little bit more technical with the web development and now all of a sudden the programming piece, that I could, kind of speak to all these different mediums, whether it be print, web, whatever. And literally within 2 weeks of graduating, I went back to school. It was a 2-year course. But 2 weeks upon graduating, I had applied for a very large local retailer, and they're a national retailer. So they're in, a handful of states, primarily in the Midwest, but I had applied for that position and ended up getting it. Spent again another almost decade in that industry doing general marketing, creative, e-commerce and web development, social media management, leading people, doing all this stuff. Well, over the course of that phase of my career, I just started to realize later on in the process, again, call it, year 7, 8, 9, whatever it was, I started to realize late in that process of being in retail and working for that company that I was just a long ways away from where I started. And in some ways that was good. I was making good money. I was doing a lot of different things and getting a lot of different opportunities than I probably would have ever gotten had I stayed, in printing or in that hardcore creative space. But I started to just not have fun as much. I was not enjoying the same uh, type of work. The creative juices were not flowing the way they once did. And I started to just kind of become a man, a spoke in the wheel, and somebody who was just punching that clock. And I thought about it for a long time as to whether or not, can I do this for the next 20 or 30 years? Can I continue to go down this road and A, not get burnt out, but B, have fun with it? And what happens if I was to ever lose this job or want to change careers because now I'm so far away from where I started? Do those skills get rusty? Do I switch careers at that point and just go find another retail job? Or does this actually diminish my capability and capacity to grow within, this kind of this vision and this track that I had created for myself? And it just changed things. Once I kind of realized how far off the track I was and how far away from where I started I honestly couldn't stop thinking about it. And I started to kind of answer my own questions of, yeah, you're a long ways off. So now that you realize it, is that okay or is it not okay? What are you gonna choose? I mean, it was a definite fork in the road. And at that time, I was getting solicited by another different industry, but an equally as large opportunity slash retailer to like, hey, we want you to come over here. We'd like you to work with us. And I'd call it kind of a transition point because I think what they were offering was more freedom, more fun, more creativity. And that was attractive to me. And that was a huge reason why I took that last opportunity prior to starting Cyberdogz. But I just got to that point even faster that, hey, now that I'm transitioning over to another retail opportunity and it's kind of feeling the same as the other one, I feel that much more validated that I need to do something different and I need to take a next step. Well, what had happened there at the end when I switched from one company to another is I started to get solicited by the brands and the companies that I had worked with, basically them asking me the question of, would you ever consult with us? Would you ever help us out with a side project? Would you ever, just be involved in this certain way? And all of a sudden, now here I was, working this new job, but at the same time, my cup was completely full with all these other side projects and all these other consulting gigs and people wanting me to help them, come up with marketing solutions, creative solutions, all these different things. And it just got to be overwhelming, but it also gave me the opportunity to validate that next step. When I got to that point, I had basically set up a free consultation with a business coach that had been recommended to me. I sat down with him. I completely explained to him the journey, here's how I got here. Here's where I'm at. Here's the fork in the road. I'm not really sure what to do. And, with one simple question back to me, it kind of made it clear what my next step was. And that question from him was, are you employable? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, if you were to lose your job today, could you go out and find another job? And I said, well, yeah, I think so. And he's like, well, then why wouldn't you try this? So the next day I went into work and I put my 2 weeks in. And 2 weeks later, I woke up, I've said this many times, but I either woke up self-employed or unemployed, however you want to look at it. And then that was the start of, Cyberdogz.
What would you say has been the most rewarding thing in starting Cyberdogz?
I think helping clients avoid the trap of thinking small, helping them see a bigger vision for themselves and being a different kind of experience for them. I went into this whole thing with the intention of providing a different experience and an intention of, doing it in a certain way, because I was lucky enough, and we completely dusted over a lot of the details, but I was lucky enough to see these different industries from a lot of different perspectives in my career. And when I talk about it, it seems like it was all very well crafted, and maybe some of it was, but there's other parts of it. I was just lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. And I got to see these different perspectives. So when I got to the point of starting Cyberdogz, I knew what it felt like to be in all these different seats on the bus and wear these different hats. I also knew what it was like to be a customer and work with an agency or a creative agency and not necessarily get the answers you're looking for or get the clarity you're needing to find those answers. So when I started Cyberdogz, that was one of the biggest things, is that I'm not going to be like everybody else. I'm going to use my experience and my perspectives and the things that I've gone through to help the client better understand what's a good fit for them, what's good for their business, and how we can help. So as far as like what's been the most rewarding, I would say sticking to that path and not buckling and not going towards the traditional, that's been the most rewarding. And it's validating when you get people to drink your Kool-Aid too. When I first started, obviously I started with a team of one, and then it went from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And now we're somewhere around 15, I think. And yeah, I mean, now you get people that kind of understand what it is we're trying to do, how it's different, and how we're not, trying to be like everybody else. And it's pretty rewarding, A, that you have people that understand and support that, but B, that now you have customers that are seeking that.
If you had to do one thing over again in starting Cyberdogz, because everything I think that you did prior to that led you to where you're at today, which ultimately, from having that young entrepreneurial spirit is where you want to be. But now that Cyberdogz is up running, has been successful for years now, what would you say was one thing you would do differently if you had to do it all over again?
I would have started sooner. Like I know I needed certain experiences and milestones within the career to educate me up to the point of, but I wish I would have started sooner, in that I probably at least spent 2 to 3 years kicking the can down the road, thinking about it, wondering if it was possible, and I should have just jumped. I should have just went for it.
It's funny, it kind of, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's the last question that I had for you in this whole thought process was, what bit of information, if you could give somebody who was, wanting to start their own business, what piece of information would you give them? And I feel like it's that same piece of information, but you should, in a informative, start it. If you're thinking about it, do it. Don't wait, think about it, just do it. But am I wrong? I mean, would you tell someone something else if they wanted to start their business?
Well, it's funny you asked that because I don't want to say I've talked people into it, but I've helped people over the edge numerous times. And it's a matter of, if you have an idea, a vision, a business, whatever it is, if you've done your homework and you're confident that the idea that you're running with is palatable and it's something that you can turn into a success, and you're financially ready and you've got all your ducks in a row, the only thing holding you back is you. Now, I've met with people who maybe haven't quite thought it through and they're like, hey, I just want to start this business. And I'll give them guidance on, hey, before you do it, here's, I go talk to these people, or think about this, or at least educate yourself to a point that when you wake up on that first day, you're ready to go. But yeah, I mean, for most people, they've thought about it for a while. And most people have, 2/3 of it figured out, whether they admit it or not. And the only part that they're waiting on or fearful of is the unknown. And I'll be honest, stepping over, like when you're looking over the edge and kind of going, oh my God, what do I do? Do I do it? Do I not do it? It's scary. It's super scary. But everything you're scared of not only finds a way to work itself out, but it's all questions that can be answered. Like the fear of, well, what if I don't have health insurance? Well, you can buy health insurance. Well, what do I do if, I'm not getting a paycheck every 2 weeks? Well, it depends on what kind of person you are. If you're very driven and you've got an idea that's sellable, and you've got an idea that's, the industry needs, or you've got customers lined up, whatever it is, yeah, your checks probably aren't going to come on the same day every month like they were when you were working for X, Y, and Z. But yeah, that's a non-issue as well, because you might be getting more checks than you got before. So like every one of those little fears that we use to talk ourselves out of it, every one of them has a solution. You just have to be ready to figure it out and make it happen. Looking over that ledge is super scary, but once you step over the edge, the clarity of, okay, this isn't that hard. Like I can do this. Like that part of it is super liberating. And it's you just have to be committed to yourself in the process. I've known entrepreneurs that took the leap and they were too casual about it. They took too many Fridays off. They didn't get up in the morning. They just didn't give it 100%. And they're like, yeah, I failed. It wasn't for me. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Maybe you had to try it. You're going to go back to the 40-hour work week, whatever, that's fine. But I think for the people who have that entrepreneurial drive, if you're committed to it and you're like, I'll do whatever it takes, I'll get up early, I'll stay late, I'll knock it out. Like it's almost impossible to fail. It really is.
I think it comes back to the, age old saying, is the risk worth the reward? And I think in your story in particular, the risk was definitely worth the reward.
Yeah. And you have to remember too, I think, you always hear about these get rich quick things, or somebody who invented X, Y, and Z widget, and inside of so many months, they're selling millions. Those things can happen, but that's a very, very, very small percentage of entrepreneurs and people that do stuff like that. The greater bulk of them, especially at the beginning, you have to work harder than you've ever worked before to get the momentum going and to get the machine running the way you want it to run. That's when you can start to sit back and kind of look at it differently and decide, okay, am I going to be an administrator of the business? Am I going to be somebody who works in the business, on the business? Am I hiring people? Like, what am I doing? Once you get that momentum going, which is 100% on you, then you can step back and be a little bit more strategic and a little bit more, outside of the box observer as to what the next steps are. But if you're willing to give it 110% out of the gate, it's not only so doable, but it is so rewarding too, because it's all for you. It's all for whatever your vision is. So even prior to starting Cyberdogz, I mean, on average, I would say I was easily working 60 to 70 hours a week for somebody else. And I would be completely exhausted and burnt out. And it was just way too many hours. Now, I mean, I don't do it as often, but if I do a 70-hour week, as the owner of Cyberdogz and with my team, it's not that tiring because I'm just having fun. The pressure's different, the rewards are different, and just, you're building something that's yours. So
I'm definitely glad that you took that leap, because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to work with you otherwise. So, and I very much enjoy working for you and for the company and everything that we do for clients and the way that we help them, because we do obviously work for a lot of entrepreneurs. The majority of our clients, if not all, are entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and that's honestly well, first of all, thank you. And I love having you on the team. But that's the thing that's fun too, is like when we work with entrepreneurs, I think we can very easily relate to them because we are also entrepreneurs and we're all kind of going through this journey together. And it's fun, honestly, to hear their stories because, without naming names, we've got some clients that have done some pretty amazing things. And to get the opportunity again to get a front row seat to their story and their guidance, as they're kind of helping us grow as well, it's a really rewarding process and journey to work with those kinds of people versus somebody who's already been down this road and pre-established for decades. So good enough.
That's all I got for you.
All right. If you'd like to learn more about Cyberdogz, share your thoughts, or even ask a specific question about this episode and/or the brand Retro Mindset, contact me directly at mike@cyberdogzmarketing.com.